Welcome to Amsterdam for tonight's food fight, where we're going to be talking about copyright law and intellectual property, especially in relation to the creative realm. And tonight we have four guests representing two sides of the argument about whether copyright is a good thing or whether it should be done away with.
Yeah, I think it's still relevant today. There are lots of industries which still rely on copyright. There can be a whole discussion about the duration of copyright. The thing is that copyright law now is for 70 years after the death of the author, which is obviously too long, especially in the digital era.
He speaks about industries. What kind of industries you are speaking about? Actually, the industries that profit from this instrument are market-dominating industries, are the Disneys, are the Hollywood studios, are the Amazons. But the fact that there are enterprises that dominate markets and need to have this investment protection is not a good idea. Because by the investment protection, you can invest heavily in blockbusters, in bestsellers that push to the markets, margins of the market. Why not restructure the market? Do two things at the same time. Take away the investment protection. Why you should give investment protection to people, to enterprises who say all the time we need to have liberal markets, free markets. At the same time you should cut those enterprises in many pieces. Then you have a level playing field. Just a normal market. In this normal market many artists can do very well.
Well, I think when we talk about industries, we also talk about the little artist, not Walt Disney, and the little artist can do very well with some income from his intellectual property rights. Like, it is not much, but they can't do away with the money. And the problems that you've been mentioning, actually, I have the feeling those are less problems of intellectual property, but rather problems of abuse of market power. So let's tackle that by competition law, but there's no need to abolish copyright law. This is a very different problem.
No, you should connect the discussions. And I know that since copyright has always been an investment protection.
There are examples now, and if I take just the most visible one, the iTunes Music Store, that operate perfectly, relatively independent of the question whether there is copyright or not. So while people can freely download music from and other types of media productions via Pirate Bay, actually they prefer to go to iTunes Store because it offers them an ease and a selection and a guarantee of quality, which means that a business model has been developed there that can exist whether there is copyright or not. It really proves the fact that we don't need the current form of copyright. We should have shorter terms of protection, more close to actual business cycles, so that's something that James Boyle also emphasizes, that we don't lock up 95% of our common cultural heritage and production just to protect 5% that maybe actually still is viable as a business in the traditional economy. Open it up much sooner so that all kinds of new innovative initiatives can emerge.
In every society, always in history, people used the work of others, went on do it, criticized it, used it, was even an honor for an artist to be adapted. And now we say it's not possible. It is forbidden. We send lawyers to tell you that you are in a terrible situation. You will be sued because you are changing the work. So the question is, even if you would have a short term of copyright, which is not necessarily if you have a normal level playing field, a normal market, then still there is the question, do you have the right to change the work?
I think that the iTunes is a very good example. I think you're completely right that this is a business model that can work without strong intellectual property rights. It's just one example of a business model. You should not forget that, of course, the digital realm is the digital realm, but that does not mean that there's no analog, no world outside the internet. There's a very big world outside the internet, and there copyright is still relevant.
Most of course.
Can you mention one business model in the analog world that can do without?
Oh yes.
Copyright?
If you don't have copyright, then the book will be published, you make a contract, author and publisher, the book comes on the market. That means that at the same moment 25 or 30 publishers, other publishers could do the book. Don't not worth to do the investment
Oh, sure.
if 20 or 30 others could do it. So you don't have to be afraid that the book will be done by others. Maybe the book becomes a bestseller, not a bestseller, because that's impossible in my vision, because you don't have those big industries.
Actually, I was quite
How?
surprised that you mentioned iTunes as the example, because usually iTunes is depicted as the devil and the main profiter from copyright. So the fact that iTunes, as you say, can develop its business models totally independent of copyright also means that if you abolish copyright, nothing will change. So iTunes, you could use the
Yeah.
iTunes example exactly the other way around.
Yeah.
And I agree with your second point, and I do think we should make a very strict distinction between copyright and excess of copyright. I mean, giving term protection for CDs for the next 200 years obviously is an excess, so we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But it changes nothing that copyright does provide incentives for authors and does provide means of actually, as Steph said, laying the basis for many viable business models.
So we were saying just before, during the last course, about the difference between digital and analog property rights and that sort of thing.
I think that we need to shift a little bit the focus. If you talk about what do actually creators get out of this, that is very, very little. And iTunes, as you said, it propagates actually the completely inadequate and disbalanced relation between creators and distributors. It just keeps the same kind of relationship in place. Therefore, just only addressing the question of protection or copyright is not enough.
We're not only talking about the distributors, and indeed, if you talk about investment protection for distribution, it makes not too much sense anymore per se. But if you talk about the value of copyright for the creative industries, who have otherwise nothing to protect their goods, it's very high.
But the question is, does somebody, is somebody actually creating any kind of public of added value, which in the end is in the eye of the beholder, so the consumer who is willing to pay a bit of money for this, or not? And if they're not creating this added value, then why would anybody bother about paying for this if they can just get it from any kind of file sharing website? Just the source material for free.
Yeah, but the fact that these models exist is not an argument against copyright, it's just an argument that there is a life next to copyright.
For example, say if somebody had written a song or made a film that somebody else cuts together and then in a different way and makes money off it, the fact that they have put something out there and made money off it, knowing full well that somebody else has put in a huge amount of work to get them that far and they've done something else on top of it and they reap the benefits of it. Do you think that's fair?
Wait, it's a question of ethics, you know, and it's really questionable whether you should organize this entirely. I see the necessity to have all kinds of systems of rules in place, but to rely entirely on formal arrangements is too narrow a view. On your question of a remix, whether that's allowed, I have quite the contrary position, which is that, for instance, you have a singer, he uses the name Michael Jackson, he makes a track called Bad, and then there comes another artist, an artist who has specialized himself in cutoff techniques and in the analog technique, releases a track called Dab, which is one of the most grandiose sound artworks that has probably ever been created, and then gets sued to the point that this work is not accessible to the audience, while this is an absolutely marvelous artwork that is totally independent of the track that Jackson created. And it's not available. If he puts it out, he will be put in jail. That for me is a completely unacceptable situation.
When you work with a big artist who has lots of big copyright and there's an estate coming in between and is going to sit on the money and demands the highest price of it, yes, then you have a problem. But That's again the copyright term. That's the length of protection. That doesn't mean that the copyright system as a whole should be abolished.
Artists always use material of others. And to give for what you add to the work an absolute ownership, because that's exclusive ownership, that's too much. Only when you would think, for market reasons, there's really a necessity. But in the 21st century, this necessity, that you have to bring a lot of police forces in, to try, and a lot of legislation which is against all constitutions, etc., to bring that in order to protect the interests of a few dominant market enterprises. That's too much.
The copyright law, the copyright system should be adjusted, but saying that it should be abolished, we can do without copyright, I don't believe it. That you can't enforce it properly in the online environment. Yes, this is also a freedom that people nowadays have.
Okay, so my point is not about pro or contra copyright, so I'm rather different than yours, but I'm really advocating that we need to fundamentally rethink the forms of protection, ways of protection, ways that these systems are now organized. And then, as the iTunes example shows, that even if you go beyond the question of copyright, then you're still not there, because then we have a central force that is controlling almost an entire market.
The industry are constantly lobbying for the extended protection, whether this is a copyright term, whether this is new rights, whether this is limited exceptions and limitations. They want to keep this big control. And if you then think about the new reality of the digital environment, it makes complete nonsense. It's complete nonsense.
But therefore, I think that the average artist is in their own coalition with those big industries. So strategically, we should think about how to get rid of those market-dominated forces.
Yeah, look, the internet is more abundant with content than it ever has been before. This is an explosion going on there.
It is not acceptable in our world that there are three companies who dominate the ambience, the sphere, the contents, the selection, the ordering, etc. of our artistic expression, cultural expressions.
It's not about abolishing copyright law in order to get rid of the three big companies. It's just the market, how the market works. There's a new business model coming up, exactly as the two of you like, and actually the two of us also like. I mean, that's actually one of the big problems. There should be more good business models.
I don't know, business
models. And what Natalie tried to say is that these were also new business models like 10 years ago. They made it. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that they will stay the business models of the future.
A lot of your problem with copyright seems to be to do with the top-heavy nature of the market, the fact that there are few companies dominating a large body of work. How do you think the eradication of copyright will actually redress this balance?
The copyright gives them the investment protection to do so.
If there was no copyright, they would get an investment protection from somewhere else. Copyright at least is transparent.
I still don't see how in your system the small author gets money. It's you still say that it's by contract, and perhaps if he sells his manuscript for the first time, yeah, he might sign a contract. Yeah. But that's it.
No,
as the author. How? I have a contract with you, and 30 other publishers can publish it for free. They will not give me any money.
They will not do it.
Of course they will. It's a bestseller.
Yeah, bestseller.
Well, I don't know what your definition of
how does the eradication of copyright eliminate the idea of a bestseller?
If you don't have copyright anymore, you don't have the investment protection to invest so heavily in blockbuster films and bestseller books.
Pure possession of market power is no evil in itself, only the abuse thereof. This is one of the fundamental principles of law and economics, of economic theory, of market theory.
Yeah. Because dominating markets means that you control the quality, that you control the contents, that you control the prices, and that is what we accept in the neoliberal situation.
Is there a distinction between domination and monopoly?
There's a very clear distinction between market power and abuse of market power. These are two very different things, and you don't punish market power in itself.
Of course, within these smaller scale models, you can't have the best sellers, but you can have all kinds of initiatives of smaller and mid-sized companies where artists would actually entrust their work because there is also a real love for the product. This intermediation simply means maybe some artists are quite good in attracting their audiences themselves. They don't need the mediators anymore. They directly go via social networking sites and all the rest of it to their clientele. This is something that has been going on for a long time, and for a lot of artists who are not within this visible and famous circle for a long time out of pure necessity. A lot of creators need to start looking at their work also as ways of not immediately selling the work itself, but using the work to sell other things.
I completely agree, but there are only few markets that can actually, and you're using again the example of the music industry, there you can easily do it. But there are lots of industries that rely on this product to sell and to distribute it as a whole.
Let's leave it there for a second because we're just going to move on to coffee. I'm tremendously excited by all the. This is it's strangely it's hotted up right near the end, which is always nice. Chef Martin Verdonk, he was absolutely fantastic in providing the food this evening. But now basically we're just going to have a sort of a brief summation.
I think that what I did learn is that from multiple perspectives we look at the problem of copyright in the digital realm most predominantly from different angles. That we try to reach conclusions of how to solve it. We do it from inside copyright law, other people do it from outside copyright law. I really don't think that outside copyright law, they can bring valuable insights, but I don't think that copyright law will be abolished soon or ever.
Well, I think this discussion very much confirmed again that it's not copyright we have to tackle, but excess of copyright and abuse of copyright. And by the way, digital and intellectual property.
My main point remains that regardless of the existing or future copyright regimes, that the first step to take is to really start thinking about innovative solutions for the kind of situation that we actually are in, and then examine from there which kind of prerequisites are necessary to create a more beneficial situation so that these innovative models can actually be developed and deployed sustainably.
It means that we come at a political question. And the political question is what kind of world we like to live in. We would like to have a situation in which many artists can find an audience. Audiences are more free to select what they like and not be pushed by marketing. That you will not have stars and blockbusters that absorb all our energy and time. It's a political question.
People mostly seem to be agreeing on is the fact that copyright law isn't perfect. It's in need of reform, but whether it should be eradicated is an entirely different question. Anyway, thank you for joining us this evening, all of you. I hope you had some good food, some good wine and some good discussion. And thanks very much for joining us. We'll be back with another episode of BAMM's Food Fight very soon from the same apartment here in Amsterdam. Until then though, good night.